Welcome to this week's look at the state of the New York City real estate market. This report is for the week of April 28th to May 4th. We'll get started with the luxury market, and we'll talk about the Manhattan and the Brooklyn markets. And I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to share some additional information with you as well as strategies to help you be successful in this current market, whether you are a buyer or a seller. There were 33 contracts signed in the luxury market last week. That is 5 more than the previous week. We're continuing to see that the luxury market is holding steady. As a reminder, these are for properties that are priced at $4 million and above. These are largely all cash deals. They're kind of their own part of the market. They have their own special place in the market. And so we like to look at that separately from Manhattan as a whole. We're not tracking the luxury market in Brooklyn currently. This is really just the luxury market for Manhattan. All that being said, let's talk about the number 1 and the number 2 contracts for last week. The number 1 contract was Penthouse E at 601 Washington Street. It was asking $29 million. It was reduced from $36.5 million when it was listed in December. This apartment spans from the 6th floor through the 9th floor. It is almost 7,500 square feet. It is a quadruplex penthouse with 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 2 powder rooms, and outdoor space that totals about 1,700 square feet. The 6th floor has 4 bedrooms and a family room with a balcony. The 7th floor has a 43-foot great room surrounded by a terrace that has an outdoor kitchen, fire pit, and a plunge pool. The 8th floor houses the primary suite, and the 9th floor has a media room that opens up onto a terrace with a hot tub. This is a 10-unit building, so quite small, and the amenities include a 24-hour doorman, fitness center, private storage, and a bike room. The monthly common charges and real estate taxes total about $21,000 a month. The number 2 contract was Penthouse 2 at 215 Christie Street. It was asking just under $18 million, reduced from $25 million when it was listed in January of 2024. This is a full-floor condo. It has 4,236 square feet. Includes 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, a 36-foot great room with a fireplace, and panoramic city views. The seller purchased this penthouse from the sponsor for a little over $20 million in January of 2018. This is also a small building. This is an 11-unit condo building built above the public hotel, designed by Pritzker Prize-winning architects Herzog and de Meuron. This condo has its own private entrance, but it has access to all the hotel amenities, and those include fitness center, rooftop terrace, and restaurant. The monthly common charges and real estate taxes for this property total a little over $18,000. The total weekly asking price sales volume, $258,787,500. Average asking price, $7,842,045. Median asking price, $5,900,000. Average discount from original ask to last asking price, 12%, and the average days on the market, 473. That's it for the luxury market for the moment. As I said at the end of this report, I will share some additional information with you about the luxury market as well as the rest of the market and give you my strategies for success. We're going to take a look now at what is going on in Manhattan and Brooklyn. In Manhattan, we saw the weekly supply at 498. That is down just a smidge, a little over 3%. Contract signed, however, rose almost 21%. 264 contracts were signed last week. And for the off-market properties, 150 properties came off the market. That is up almost 58%. The supply, 1,919 for the month. That is down almost 17%. Contracts signed, 1,011, that is down a little over 14%. Off-market properties rose for the month, 522, up almost 29%. We see that the market pulse over the last month, I would say, has been kind of steadily falling. It was starting to move up into that seller range. It is back to pretty solidly neutral and balanced. This is a reflection of the balance in the market between the supply and the demand. And so good thing for us to keep an eye on. The luxury pace chart showing this 30-day moving window of contracts signed, 1,011, that is down 12% from last month, up a little over 6% from last year, again showing kind of neutral liquidity. That is it for the moment for Manhattan. At the end of this report, of course, I'll give you a little more information, a few more details that will be helpful to you. Now we're going to take a look at what's going on in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, we saw the inventory rise a little over 11% for the week. 311 new properties came on the market. Contracts signed, 145. That is down almost 10% for the week. Off-market rose, wow, 100 and almost 25%. 128 properties in Brooklyn came off the market last week. The supply for the month in Brooklyn, 1,007 properties came on the market. That is down about 14% for the month. Contracts signed, 605. That is down 1%. Off-market properties rose almost 33%, 281. The latest reading on the market pulse for Brooklyn shows we are rising rather than falling back into this more neutral place. We had been kind of down a bit in the last, let's call it again, month. We saw that the Brooklyn market was kind of leaning towards the buyers, not 100%, but we do see that there's quite an uptick. And now, as with Manhattan, we are back in that neutral, balanced place. And so from last month, that's up 1.5%, and it's down a little less than 1% from last year. The liquidity pace chart for Brooklyn for the last 30 days shows 605 properties went into contract. That is up almost 5% from last month, down a little over 1.5% from last year. So that's it for Brooklyn for the moment. I'm going to wrap everything up now, share some additional information with you as well as strategies to help you be successful in this current market, whether you are a buyer or a seller. So there were 33 contracts signed last week in the luxury market. That is 5 more than the previous week. 6 of those properties were in the trophy category, meaning they were priced at $10 million and above. The majority of these contracts signed were condos, 23. The co-ops, there were 5, 1 condo and 4 townhouses. 18 of those contracts were uptown, 15 were downtown. So let's talk about Manhattan and Brooklyn markets again, just for a moment. Talk a little more specifically about the conditions, give you some overview here. The supply and the contract activity in both Brooklyn and Manhattan do seem to be fairly balanced. We're definitely see supply rising. We're beginning to see the contract activity picking up, which is nice to see because it's been a little slow for sure in Brooklyn and over the last couple of weeks with the holidays and everything in Manhattan. The overall supply in Manhattan is 7,248, and in Brooklyn, it is 3,473. The pending sales in Manhattan, 3,324, Brooklyn, 2,027. Off-market properties total 3,371, and in Brooklyn, 1,690. Average days on the market in Manhattan have fallen a bit, down to about 82 now, and in Brooklyn, 56. The liquidity pace, this 30-day moving window of contracts signed, as I said, 1,011 for Manhattan, 605 for Brooklyn. Overall, we are seeing the supply ticking up. This is great. If you're a buyer, sellers, it means you have more competition, so watch for that. It may be that with the increase in supply, and we're beginning to see a little bit of an increase in the demand as well in both Manhattan and Brooklyn, we may see the spring market begin to show a little more life to it. As I had mentioned a report or two ago, March was a great start for our spring market. And then with the macroeconomic news, world news, global news, I think that's the same thing, we saw a kind of a pause. On the part of the buyers, things got a little quiet. Then there were some holidays, but it looks like we're back on track, cautiously optimistic here. We're going to keep an eye on it. So, as promised, I'm going to share some additional information with you, starting with the mortgage rate chart. Mortgage rates, for the most part, as you'll see, are kind of holding steady, although they have gone down a bit over the month of April. So the other two charts I want to share with you have to do with Manhattan and Brooklyn rentals. Typically, we only talk about sales, but the rental market does have an impact on the sales market and vice versa. What we're seeing is that the supply is not keeping up with the demand in Manhattan and Brooklyn in terms of rentals, and the prices are being pushed up. What these charts are showing you is how dramatically these prices have risen. So with the pressure on the rental market, it may well be that a certain number of people who were looking to rent will decide instead that it is better for them to buy and keep that money in their pocket rather than paying somebody else's mortgage or just simply putting money in somebody else's pocket, money that they will never get back. So some important strategies. If you are a buyer or a seller, we'll start first with the sellers. These market conditions continue to be neutral. I showed you that chart for a little while. Manhattan seemed to be kind of favoring the sellers, not really, but had the illusion of that. Whereas in Brooklyn, the conditions seem to be slightly favoring the buyers. Again, this is illusory. This is any moment in time, but for quite a while now, we have seen both Manhattan and Brooklyn markets remain fairly neutral, fairly balanced, and fairly steady. So, if you are a seller with neutral market conditions, you must make sure that your asking prices in alignment with the market. Try to get your deal done in the first 30 days. That is when you will make the most money. You will know in the first 30 to 60 days if your strategy is working. More time on the market equals less money in your pocket. The inventory is continuing to rise as well. So be sure that you are aware of your competition. Buyers, for you, more inventory means more choices. This is all good news and perhaps exciting to those who've been looking for a while, haven't seen what they like, or are starting to see some things that they like after not having very many choices previously. Do remember that each situation is unique depending on property type, location, condition. For the most part, it is important to remember prices are holding fairly steady. And if you want leverage, look to those properties that have been on the market 120 days or more. That is where you will very likely find that you get a little more for your money. That is it for this week's look at the state of the New York City real estate market. Good to see that the spring market is showing some signs of life again. Maybe this will mean that we will actually even go into June a little more than we normally would because people kind of put everything on pause in April. As always, my thanks to the Olshan Luxury Report and to Urban Digs. The work they do helps me to help you to make great decisions. I'll be back next week with the very latest news on what's happening in the New York City real estate market. In the meantime, take care.